when you're in the military, you're really sacrificing a lot, but then when you get out, like you're trying to reinvent yourself a little bit. You're trying to like remember those dreams that you had and, pick back up and start pursuing them again.
Hello, everybody. This is NanaTalks. I'm your host, Yarena Hotlip, and today Andrew Eubanks joining me. He is the ex-Marine and currently he is executive coach. Thank you for joining me. Pleasure having you here.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me on. Really excited to chat with you today.
Thanks. So let me just jump into the topics I really would love to talk to you today. So I know, and I've found this statistic online, so I don't know whether it is super exact, but that's the best I could get out of there, that veterans are 45% more likely to be self-employed comparing to non-veterans. And of course, they're bringing a lot of valuable skills and leadership and most probably strategic planning to the business world. But what are your thoughts about what are the main reasons behind this impressive statistics?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things behind it. In my observations, there's a lot of veterans who they've been in this highly structured environment for a long time. They've also been asked to sacrifice a lot of their time, their interests, their hobbies, passions, right? For either deployments or training or just military service in general. And so I think a lot of times when veterans get out, they're ready to like explore and engage with those passions and interests that they have. And they're also interested in being able to have a little bit more autonomy over their time that entrepreneurship enables them to do. And so I think like those aspects kind of drive a lot of veterans towards entrepreneurship.
Right, that makes a lot of sense. Now, one of my previous guests, Juan, he was serving in Canada Army, but still, I assume that there are a lot of similarity. And
Sure.
he was mentioned that for him, that was very hard to like keep his dreams and aspirations inside of him during the serving time. He was serving for 7 years, and he discovered that for him, after he was trying to make that transition to civilian life, it was very hard to remind himself what it was all about for him before army.
Yeah, so I mean, when you're in the military and you're active duty serving, it's you're putting a lot of your dreams on hold. I mean, you're putting a lot of things on hold. There are a lot of other jobs, whether that's in corporate America or whatnot, where there are a lot of people that have side businesses or side gigs that they do. They pursue different projects or passions, and when you're in the military, almost every time that situation comes up, it's just not possible or plausible for you to continue doing that just because of the demands on your time and energy. And so, yeah, I think when you're in the military, you're really sacrificing a lot, but then when you get out, like you're trying to reinvent yourself a little bit. You're trying to like remember those dreams that you had and, pick back up and start pursuing them again.
So for these folks who are right in the middle of this process, maybe you have some good advices, techniques, how that might be easy done.
Yeah. I mean, the transition can be very challenging, and it can be a rocky road that can lead to a lot of hardship if you're not prepared for it. And I know for myself, that was definitely the case. I thought I was prepared, but I wasn't. And the military, you're in this highly structured environment. You're surrounded by people that are like telling you what to do all the time. You also have a lot of support, and when you get out, and you're also when you're in the military, you're told like who you are, like what your identity is, what your purpose is, what your values are. And then you get out of the military, and it's very easy to fall into an identity crisis of like of thinking, who am I? What are my values? What am I going to do? Those are all questions that I asked myself in my own transition, and that I see other veterans asking themselves as well. And so leading up to a transition, and especially if you're going to pursue entrepreneurship, is to get really clear on what your values are. What are your core values that you have, that you're going to hold true to and like live your life by? Because those values are going to drive like what your purpose is and like what you're trying to actually accomplish throughout your life, like what's going to be important to you. And you really need to have those clear values, clear priorities, clear purposes in your life, if you're going to embark on the crazy journey of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, that's true. You never can say for sure what will the next day bring to you
No.
if you're and when you're in this like journey. But
Right.
yeah, but do you have any advices how these clear values and goals can be set? Because I know even from my experience, and I've never been in the army, it is incredibly hard to figure out those values at first, and secondly, to be okay with the idea that maybe values will stay the same, but your goals, your ideas, a lot of things will change over time, and this is okay. You have to be flexible. You cannot
Mhm.
just stick to them way too hard.
Yeah, the one of the really good exercises that you can do is it's an exercise that I share with my clients. Is you can just Google, list of values, and there's a couple different sheets that'll come up. Some are by Brene Brown, some are by James Clear, and others. But you can look at it like a long list of values, and then the exercise you can do is, hey, just go through that list and in 1 to 2 minutes highlight or circle 10 values that resonate with you. All right. And then take those 10 values, write them down separately on a separate sheet of paper. And then in the next 1 minute, highlight or circle the 5 values that resonate even more, that they resonate the most. And now you've kind of done it through that exercise. You've kind of been able to identify like what your core values are. Amongst all those values, there's a lot of things. Some of them are similar, some of them aren't. But then you can kind of distill down to like what are your 3 to 5 to 6 core values that you can live your life by and use as a filter for how you make decisions and how you choose to behave and what you pursue in life. You can do that. Another activity they can do in conjunction with that is list out like what your priorities are on, fold a piece of paper in half on one side, list like, okay, 1 to 5, what are your priorities in life? And they should correspond somewhat to the values that you have. Maybe it's family or, pursuing a hobby or a passion, building a business. I don't know. And then on the other sheet of paper, turn it over and write down like how you spend your time each day and each week. And then open the sheet of paper up and compare the two. If you're not spending your time in alignment with what your values and priorities are, you're going to have a lot of inner turmoil and dissatisfaction. And so the key to living a fulfilling, satisfying life is to spend your time, your resources, and energy in alignment with what your core values and priorities are.
Have you ever faced with the situation when maybe your clients or one of your group are saying to you, you know what, nothing feels correspondent to me. I'm so deep down into depression or into crisis of personality that nothing feels okay to me.
Yeah, it's not difficult to actually get to that point of whether you're facing mental health challenges, depression, or you just feel lost or stuck, right? Like it's so common, especially for veterans, after you leave the service. But the key is in those moments is to turn towards self-care. Um, Whether, for me, I look at it as sleep, exercise, nutrition, and relationships. Those are the 4 key aspects for me for mental health that if I can turn to those things, maybe it's like, hey, I need to take a nap, or I need to start getting better night's sleep. I need to eat a little bit better. I need to just start exercising a little bit, moving my body each day. Spend some time with loved ones or friends, go on a date with my wife, or go have lunch with a friend. Building relationships again. Those 4 aspects: sleep, fitness, nutrition, and relationships are foundational, and it's going to be really hard to like get yourself out of like that slump of depression or mental health struggles without that foundation to build on. And so self-care is what I always advise people to turn to when they are in that slump.
Right. I was just listening yesterday to one of the interviews of Jocko Willing, and he was mentioning that when you're starting to take care about your body, you inevitably will take care about your mind, because those two are super interconnected. And when you will start to train, to go to gym, whatever, to just jogging, that will inevitably make you better at everything, at your job, how you feel, what do you do, basically at everything.
100%, absolutely. Yeah, it's so interconnected, our minds and bodies. You know, for a long time, we put physical health and mental health into silos and treated them separately, but they're so interconnected that you really got to think about both aspects when you're treating both of those things in your life. And so anything you can do for your physical health is going to improve your mental health as well.
That makes a lot of sense. But on the other hand, I don't know, maybe that's only my impression, but I assume that not necessarily. When you're thinking about anybody connecting to the army, you would imagine super healthy, super, people
Yeah.
in general. But afterwards, after they are making that transition to civilian life, I'm getting and I'm seeing this, well, very scary in a way, statistics about mental health issues, about the fact that they don't want to take care about their bodies because they are so deeply depressed. So I'm
Hmm.
wondering, what are the reasons behind of that they're going, from the point I'm super healthy, I'm superhuman, to a point I don't want to do anything.
Yeah, so it's a slippery slope that you can fall down quickly. But what I see a lot of times is that you start off leaving the military, like you're maybe in good shape, you're taking care of yourself physically, and then you're trying to think about all these other things now that you got going on, all these new uncertainties, these new stressors. And so as the stress builds, your your mind and your judgment gets cloudy. You get foggy brain and you just don't think as clearly, and you deprioritize your physical health. So maybe you're not sleeping as well or as much as you should, you're not eating healthy, you're not exercising like you used to. And when you've spent 4 to 10 years or 20 years in the military and you're used to exercising regularly, and then all of a sudden you're really stressed, you're worried about all these other things that you're spending a lot of time on, and you think that those other things are more important, and you prioritize them over your physical health, then you start going down that slippery slope really fast. And before you know it, you can be in a really bad spot mentally, because you have deprioritized your health. And that's why it's really so important to get clear on your core values, and also make sure that your priorities are set and that you're practicing self-care, whatever that looks like for you, on a regular basis consistently, so that you keep yourself out of that spiral.
Yeah, and it feels like I was just like, while I was listening to you, I was thinking about the numbers, right? I'm seeing. So it feels almost like all the veterans, they're falling into two very, very different camps. Or that it's going to be 76% camp of the folks who are, no, basically they are saying that they are facing a lot of mental health issues, or the other 82% of all the veteran related or led companies, their aims of self and they are seeing themselves as successful companies. So basically, or you figure out your core values and now you're in that 82% camp who will be successful, because that's like statistic for over 10 years. 80 plus, let's put it that way, 80 plus percent of everybody, I mean, of all the veterans who started their business, they will be fine. They will pass this valley of death of the second, third, and fifth year of being an entrepreneur, because it's easy to start, but not that easy to survive into entrepreneurship. Or they unfortunately going to fall into another camp, and I would assume that that's again because of the lack of these core values set up properly and figured out at the time. So what would be your advice when is the best time to start to think about those values? After you kind of make that transition, or while you're thinking about making that transition to civilian life?
Yeah, I think it's super important that you do it before your transition. That way, once the transition starts, you're really busy. It's easy to be overwhelmed and to just, and like the stress can build quickly. I know that's what happened to myself. And excuse me, it wasn't until after my transition that I went back and kind of started, doing some of these exercises to get real clear on who I am, who I want to be, and what I want to accomplish, and with those values and priorities, right? And so I think before you transition to civilian life, get really clear, get as clear as you can on like what you want your identity to be and who you want to be as a civilian. And then once you make the transition, revisit those exercises and reflect again and continue that process. I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago. I'm not the same person I was last year. And so it's important to regularly reflect and gain new self-awareness of like who you are and who you want to be, on a regular basis so that you're staying on track.
Yeah. So if you could advise yourself when you was on that transition, you mentioned that you thought that you were ready. What would be the
Mhm.
checklist you would give to yourself? Like, here are all the items, right? Just check them.
Yeah, so I would say like start off with like, a timeline of, hey, this is everything I need to do to transition to get out of the military, whether, and, there's a lot of requirements you have to do to get out of the military. And, for an individual or a family that's going to be leaving service. So, figuring out where you're going to live, like, are you going back to school? Are you starting a business? Are you getting a job? What are all those things? And then work yourself backwards, work from the timeline of like, okay, this is when I'm getting out and starting a new job, or when I'm getting out and starting a business or going to school. Work backwards and figure out like what are the key timelines and events that I need to do in order to get to that goal that I have. And then at the very beginning, start off with your values and priorities, and then start making yourself, little micro wins and micro goals that are going to get you to that major goal that you have at the end of whatever it is for you. That's what I would do. Looking back, the other thing I would do is I would also write down and commit myself to practicing those self-care practices throughout the whole process, because it's going to be stressful. No matter what, no matter how prepared you are, there's going to be some stress involved because it's something new. It's uncertain. There's uncertainty involved. And so could really commit yourself to taking care of your health, physical and mental health, throughout the whole process.
And what was your like moment of a time when you decided, okay, let's make that leap of faith. Let's start my own venture.
Yeah. So when I first got out, I went and I worked in, did consulting for a big corporate tech company. And I did that for a while, and I just wasn't finding the fulfillment that I was hoping I would, in that job. And so, I had thought about coaching, executive coaching, and doing consulting as well, just on my own as a solopreneur. And finally, I just like, what? I'm tired of working in this job, and I'm ready to make the leap and start doing it myself. And so, finally, it was a combination of dissatisfaction with my corporate role and the desire and dreams that I had for myself. Because coming out of the military, entrepreneurship was always something that I dreamed about and wanted to do. And at some point, I was like, like, why am I waiting? Like, there's never a perfect time to become an entrepreneur. It's like trying to time like the stock market. You never know what's going to happen. You just use your best judgment and hop in, right? And so that's what I finally did, and that's what I've been doing for most of this year. And it's been a great learning experience. Very hard, very challenging, but a lot of learning.
I can imagine. Without sharing any under NDA details, what would be the most challenging use case you faced with?
Yeah, I mean, in my new role as trying to coach individuals. Um, every coaching session is a challenge because someone's coming to you with a new challenge, a new problem, a new concern that they're looking to you to solve, right, as a coach. And so like every coaching session is a challenge in itself, which I love the variety, and I love how it challenges me. The other problem set that I'm always trying to crack is like, how do you find new clients? How do you continue to grow your business? And as an entrepreneur, that's something that you're always going to deal with. And that's something that sometimes that uncertainty is something that you should be aware of as well going into entrepreneurship, that you're always going to have to be working to maintain and grow your business.
Especially when we were talking about that type of business, when you how did the Dr. Sebastian told me the other day, you own the job or you create the job. So when you own the job, it means that if you cannot work, well, that's it, your company is done. But if you create the job, that means that it is like scalable something something. So if you own, I don't know, the manufacturing company, the fact that you are on the sick leave doesn't necessarily mean that the whole factory gonna stop. So of course it is the very challenging thing. But the other thing I would assume quite challenging is, especially taking into account all this not necessarily great flair around shrinking and coaching, that, oh, I'm coming to you, I'm paying tons of money, and all you can say to me is like, well, you can think about it, or like, you will figure that out. It's not necessarily very helpful, or at least for people, it can feel like, oh, it's just like wasting times and money. I'm wondering if you have faced with something like that, and what are your answers?
Yeah, I think when people come to you for coaching, and similarly, if someone goes to someone for therapy or something, sometimes you go there and you're expecting people to just tell you what to do, and that's not coaching. That's consulting and advising, which is very different. Coaching is about unlocking like the immense potential and power that's inside each of us. No one knows yourself. No one's going to know your business. No one's going to know your situation better than you do. And so, we of course hire and you utilize advisors and consultants as needed that bring added experience and background to like what you're trying to do, whatever kind of nut you're trying to crack. But when it comes to yourself and making your decisions for yourself and really maximizing your own potential, no one knows yourself better than yourself. And so coaches really help you kind of just see things from a new perspective, really help you tap into like that potential that's inside of you, and just use the innate power that you already have to solve the challenges that you're facing.
So, in which cases should I go to coach if, I don't know, if I'm facing problems with my revenue? I cannot find a new client and I'm super frustrated and stressful about it, and it's ruined my everything. Should I go to advisor, to coach, to consultant?
Well, if you have the means, I'd probably try all of them. Um, but if you go to a coach, like a really good coach, in this case, like a business coach, they're gonna, or even just like a professional executive coach, they're gonna kind of help you like see and think about like the different aspects of your business that maybe that you haven't tapped into for lead generation or finding clients, because you're gonna know and just naturally, intuitively, who your ideal clients are, how do you find them, and what's going to resonate with them. And so like helping yourself kind of like get clarity on that, and then confidently and courageously go out and execute on it, is what a coach can kind of help guide you to do.
So it almost feels like, if I would be the veteran in transition or whatever, that also would be a great spot to find myself. I don't know, at the chair right next to executive coach or coach.
Absolutely. Like I've spent a lot of time and money on coaches for myself, and it's been of immense value. And so I would never hire a coach that doesn't use coaches themselves. But I found like most of the time in the coaching community, coaches recognize the power of coaching and utilize other coaches for themselves as well. And so it's kind of like a therapist that goes and sees a therapist. There's just value in working with someone else that brings outside perspective.
Yeah, I was under impression that you're supposed to have supervisor, that there is no other way, like for coach or for a therapist. You just have to have supervisor. But how can I, like, if I would be someone from the street and I really feel that I need some help, how can I figure out whether you do have a coach by yourself or whether you have a supervisor? Should that be my first question? Like, hey, Andrew, do you have a coach? Awesome. Okay, now I can work with you.
Well, I would just ask, for me, like I like to follow people along, whether it's, checking out their marketing material or like just a lot of times on LinkedIn or other social channels. I like to follow their content to see what kind of stuff are they posting. Does it resonate with me? Is it in the same vein as what I'm interested in or what I'm struggling with? And then I also like to just have a consultation. I would always have a consultation with someone first before, paying them or signing up for a coaching package, and see if you're actually like a good fit. And you can ask those questions in those consultations of, okay, like, hey, what's your background in coaching? Like, how did you get into it? What's how have you utilized coaching in the past and how's it helped you? And, how does like working together look like in our situation? So I would always do a consultation with a coach before hiring them.
So that's okay to ask questions as well. Okay,
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely.
good to know. I never thought about it. I'm
Yeah,
being super
absolutely.
honest here with you. I also I work with a lot of coaches, but I've never thought it never even appeared in my mind that I can ask questions as well. Like
Oh yeah,
how
you
everything will
should.
look
Yeah.
like. So there you go. So okay, help me and other folks to create that checklist. What should be our questions, except of like figuring out the general okay ish, like our vibes are like intersected and I'm okay to talk with this person, but how can I figure out whether it's going to be basically effective, right, way for me to spend my time?
Yeah, yeah. I would ask, how often do you meet with your clients? What kind of activities or exercises or coaching modalities do you utilize regularly? What type of clients have you helped in the past? What types of problems or challenges have you helped them overcome? Um, those are all great questions to ask. And then also ask like, what is it? And just ask them point blank, what does it look like for you and I to work together, for me to be coached by you? What do you envision that looking like? And what type of progress do you envision us being able to achieve?
Wow, those are so great questions. Thanks a lot. I really haven't thought about that. It's
Yeah.
just mind blowing.
Because coaches cost money, right? They're not, coaching isn't cheap. And if you're going to get a really good coach, you want to make sure that you're investing money that's well put, right? You want to make sure that it's a good investment because you're investing in yourself when you hire a coach. Same thing for your business when you're hiring an advisor or a consultant. You want to make sure that the investment is going to pay off. And anytime like you go to work with a coach, you should be expecting, a 5, 10, 20x return on the value because of like what they're going to be able to bring to you and helping you unlock.
So here is yet another, I would assume, problem to understand that returnment of investments, right? The one you've just mentioned, five, I don't know, whatever, 10x, 100x. You need to understand where you are right here, right now. Because
Yes.
I mean, most probably, and that's from my experience, when you are starting to work with a coach, especially if that's amazing coach, you're gonna start to unlock the different layers and points of view you've never even thought about. And sometimes it even may feel that, oh my God, it everything is just become worse just because you've never thought about it.
Mm-hmm.
The problems always were there. You just haven't thought about it. So now when you started to, just paying attention to them, it feels like overwhelming. You will deal with that, but like along the way, right? So what would be your advice? How can I figure out that starting point to understand that, okay, yeah, retirement of investments are like over there for me?
Yeah. So, I mean, I tell people that self awareness is the birthplace of positive change. And that's what you just said. Like, until you realize like what your actual situation is, like, it's really hard to make the improvements that you need, or that you want to have if you don't know where you're at, where you're starting from. And so, like, as you start to work with a coach, sometimes, like, as you're unlocking like these new perspective, new points of view for yourself, like, sometimes you do realize, like, oh, maybe my situation isn't as bad as I thought. Or sometimes you realize, like, oh, or actually my situation's bad, and you do feel overwhelmed, like you said. And so with everything, it's about prioritization. And so, like, when you start to realize like where you're actually at and all the challenges that you're actually facing, you just got to rank them. Like, what is the one that's causing me the most suffering, the most hardship, the most heartache, and is that I need to address immediately? And then you just work through them one by one. And I have found that as you work through those challenges, a lot of times when you start hitting out that number one, number two, number three, some of those other challenges and problems at the bottom of your list, they kind of just start to go away on their own, as you start to work through those big main ones. And so the big key is to, hey, we're not going to be able to solve everything at once, but let's just make a list. Like, what is the biggest challenges that your biggest challenge that you're facing now? Let's rank them, 1 to 10 or 1 to 5, whatever it is. And we're going to just tackle them from the top. And each time we meet, we're going to work on a different one, and make sure that you're walking away feeling good and fulfilled and satisfied with like what you've been able to resolve.
Right, that makes sense. So that means that coaching is basically never ending story, exactly as therapy.
Well, hopefully like by working with a coach, whether that's a 3, 6, or 9, 12 month engagement, whatever type of package that you purchase with a coach, that you learn to self coach, that you learn to become a master self coach of yourself. And so, once you learn some of those techniques and like how to ask the questions, you can start doing that with yourself to help coach yourself through some of those challenges that you're facing. And that's the ultimate goal. I mean, there's always, if you're feeling really stuck, there's always value in going back to a coach to get help. And, I still do that regularly. That I don't meet with the same coach all the time, but there's coaches that I meet with infrequently, but it's helpful because different challenges come up. And it's good to be able to have someone to talk through it with. But the goal is to become a master self coach for yourself.
So that's not only okay to ask questions when you're coming to coach, but also it's okay to change coaches depending on your goals.
Absolutely, yeah. Or maybe you work with a coach that's more focused on mindset or mental health or something for 3 to 6 months or something, and then you've gotten really good there, and then a year down the road you realize, what, actually, like, my physical health isn't doing so well, or my emotional health isn't doing so well. I want to focus on someone that can coach me through improving my health, my physical health, or maybe my relationships. And so you just kind of find the coaches for that season of life.
Right. So in which case should I come to you?
Well, my experience is a lot in life transitions or crisis. And so, like, people who feel like they're stuck, that they're in that spiral going down, that they're just, feel like they don't know who they are or what they want to do or how to solve the problem in front of them. And that it's just like exponentially getting worse. I help people like get out of that spiral, think clearer, gain the clarity, the confidence, and the courage to go through whatever transitional period you're in, to come out the other side better and where you want to be.
Well, you picked the most complex problem to tackle and work with. Uh, uh, we've just like touched a little bit this question about like feeling depressed, and sometimes when you're depressed, and I mean closer to the clinical type of depression, you have zero self-awareness. You simply cannot understand that you are in that spiral.
Yeah.
uh, I don't know if you even had a chance to work with folks like that, but what would be your advice in case if guys just they feel nothing, how they
Yeah.
can start to analyze or bring up that self-awareness into their life?
Yeah. I think, sometimes, you know, therapy is, a coach once told me that therapy is archaeology and coaching is architecture. And so, therapy, you're really looking at the past. But in coaching, you're just looking in the past long enough to understand like where you're at right now. And so, if I was coaching a person in that situation, I would be like, okay, well, let's just go back a little bit. When's the last time that you did feel fulfillment or joy or satisfaction with your life? Like, what was going on? What were you doing? What were the hobbies that you used to enjoy? What were your dreams or vision? Okay, let's go from there and talk about, okay, well, what happened or what's been going on that maybe has led to where you're at right now. And then once we get to that point, we can understand like, oh, like I have a little bit of like a history understanding now of like what happened. Now let's just like reverse it. Let's like start doing some of the things that you need to do that you used to enjoy so that we can like get you back to a better place. Like for myself, it was one of the things was exercise. Like I mentioned it before, but like when I started transitioning and it was spiraling, like stress and everything else, my exercise like completely just fell off the plate. And that's something that I had done ever since I was a youth. I had always exercised on a regular basis. And for me, it was like, okay, like I just got to like push through some of the discomfort and start exercising just a little bit on a more regular basis. And it's crazy at how effective making just small incremental improvements can make on your life and on your mood and on your well-being.
Absolutely. But I would be wondering, how did you brought that discipline? Because you're absolutely right. It has to be incremental, basically routine, right? You had to do that every day. How did you manage to make sure that you're going to do that every day? Small steps, but every day.
Yeah, it comes back to like those core values and beliefs, and the priorities that you set. Like for me, like I know like I want to feel better. That's a priority for me. It's practicing self-care to improve my overall health, physical and mental. And so, when the times that I don't want to exercise, I think about like, well, how am I going to feel by not exercising? How am I going to feel if I do exercise? And like I said, it's just about starting small. So maybe it's like I I should go for a run, but I'm going to go. I don't feel like it, but I can go for a walk. And so you just do what you can when you can. Something is always better than nothing. And so you just got to do what you're capable of doing in that moment.
Yeah. So we just touched a little bit of the archaeology. Now let's talk about architecture. What are the future plans for your venture? For what are your dreams and aspirations?
Yeah, so I have a few things I'm working on, continuing to build my coaching practice, to help as many people as I can to get out of that spiral and to fulfill their own visions and dreams for themselves. But I'm also looking at working with collegiate and professional athletes, who go through their transition period from being an athlete to a non-athlete is very similar to like what veterans go through leaving the military, as far as like loss of identity, loss of purpose, loss of structure. And so I'm hoping to kind of add on to my coaching practice in a way that works with collegiate and professional athletes to help them go through those similar transitions that parallels the transitions of veterans.
Whoa, that's again, you're picking complex problems. You're like, okay, let me pick the worst one. Okay, there you go. This is gonna be
That's where the fun is, solving the really complex challenges and wicked problems. So I find enjoyment in the challenge of it, and it's what kind of like gets me excited about doing it.
Yeah. I it seems to me that I do understand what you're talking about, because at
Yeah.
the end of the day, I'm startup founder, right? So I also like has chosen from all of the available stuff and things like, okay, here's the worst one, love it, gonna live with it. So to wrap up, let me ask you the question I've been asked like recently at one of the podcast interview I gave, and that was absolutely not connected to my professional career or whatever, but I loved it. If you could have a dinner with any two people living or like from the past, who would that be and why?
Wow, what a great question. Um, I would say one person would be Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln went. He suffered a lot of depression in his life, um, and overcame a lot of just hardship in his life as well. And so, I would love to sit down and just like talk with him and hear about how he overcome those challenges to continue to be the president and the leader that he was in such a horrendous, challenging time in American history. That would be one person. Um, Another person, I'm a huge fan of. I love U.S. history, and so I read a lot of biographies of founding fathers as well as presidents. One of my other favorites is Theodore Roosevelt. And I love the energy that he just brings to life and the leadership and vitality that he brought to his civil service career in many different positions, including president. But he also went through a lot of hardships in his life through personal loss and health challenges and everything else. And so I love talking to people who have overcome adversity and hearing like what got them through. I find a lot of inspiration through that.
Wow, that was very interesting choice. Thank you so much for sharing. I mean, Theodore Roosevelt, honestly, I wouldn't even thought about it, but you're absolutely right. He's such a huge figure. Sometimes we tend to forget about him behind the shoulders of, I don't know, GFK, FDR, et cetera, right? There are a huge amount of, and of
Mm-hmm.
course, founding fathers, but we had a lot of great presidents and they had huge, tremendous impact. Even I would say on our today's life, right? We
Absolutely.
can we can feel that, and we still can learn a lot of stuff from the past. Thank you so much for joining me today, Andrew. It was a great pleasure and honor, and I really hope that we will have yet another conversation in some time. And I'm looking forward to see how you're going to build up your amazing career. And
Thank
thank
you
you
so
for
much.
service and for your help.
Thank you so much. And I hope the listeners got a little something out of this. And I'm excited that we got to do it.